Hey, welcome to the special edition of the Working Writer Podcast. I'm your not quite caffeinated enough host, Brad Staggs, and yes, popping up in the corner to prove he's still alive is producer Dave Bennell. So the question I'm always asked is, why did I start this podcast? Well, there are three simple reasons. First, I was preparing to deploy with the 29th Infantry Division and needed a creative outlet. Second, I needed to hold myself accountable. You see, it's hard to tell others to write if you're not doing it yourself. And third, honestly, it just sounded like fun. A chance to learn from writers, actors, producers, anyone willing to share their story, and hopefully pass a little motivation on to you. So today, we're going to take a look back at some of my favorite episodes and conversations. Some of these are audio only from a simpler time, but don't worry, producer Dave will make it look good. Won't you? So let's get into it. You know, Marcel Proust once wrote, "Never meet the people you admire. You'll be disappointed." Well, with all due respect, he clearly never met Dave Barry. Dave was on my dream guest list from day one. I just never thought he'd actually say yes. When he did, that was the first time I was nervous to hit record. Probably didn't help that right before we started, I showed him my collection of his articles going all the way back to the 80s. Not a stalker, I promise. But they're all right here. Since Dave, I had to ask him, what was it like to work in a newsroom back in the day? I mean, back when noise was everything, back when it was fun. And of course, Dave being Dave, gave me the absolute most honest answer he could. So let's take a listen to Dave Barry. Now, of course, 1971, we're talking the days of romanticizing the newsroom. We're talking all the president's men, Washington Post. What was it like in a small town newspaper as opposed to what we've romanticized?
Well, I've been lucky enough to get started in a small town newspaper, and then I went to the Associated Press, and then I was teaching effective writing. Then I ended up at the Miami Herald, which was a big time newspaper. But they were essentially the same experience. It's just the daily local news. It was a room with maybe 20 reporters in it, and everybody smoked cigarettes and drank coffee. That's what I picked up both of those habits, unfortunately. And then, for a while, I thought I could not write anything without a lit cigarette and a cup of coffee. It was really stupid when I think back on it. But yeah, you would just be in a little room, and we had manual typewriters, so it was loud. And newsrooms were always loud. You could yell to other people, and often you yelled bad words to other people. There's a lot of swearing. It was the most politically incorrect environment. And then when I got to the Miami Herald at the beginning, this was the 80s still, it was still that way. Mostly there was switching over to computers then, which was another reason for swearing, because nobody ever understood how the computers worked. So it was a lot of saying bad words to the computer, but it was still like, now, oh my God, you go into a newsroom. Well, since COVID, there are no newsrooms, but in the immediate pre-COVID era of newsrooms, it's like this giant, dead quiet, serious, and everybody seems to be 23 years old, and everybody went to Northwestern or Harvard, and they're quietly talking on their phone, and they're typing, and they're quietly conferring, but nobody ever yells "fuck," like this is what you used to hear routinely I hope it's okay to say this.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but you used to hear that word all the time in the newsroom, and not just by men either. It was just, there was a different environment, and it was fun. I mean, you kind of liked the energy and the excitement, and weird things would happen in newsrooms. Like, this is just kind of maybe the most extreme example, but you would look up and there would be a guy come in with a kangaroo. Why? Because the circus was in town. And the PR guy from Simpsons would bring the kangaroo to the newspaper. Why? Because he knew we would take a picture of it and put it in the newspaper. And you just never knew who was going to wander into the newsroom, because it was like a happening, exciting part of the city, which is not the case anymore, obviously, with journalism. But it was then, and it was fun. And we old people all go, man, these kids today don't know what they missed.
Katy O'Brien, actor, fellow Hoosier, and friend, was actually our first celebrity guest and just our third episode, back when I was still trying to figure this whole thing out. Now, at the time, her breakout role in Love Lies Bleeding hadn't even been released yet, and roles in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Mission Impossible, and The Running Man were still pretty far ahead of her. So I had to ask, from a writer's perspective, what does she actually look for in a script? She had fantastic things to say. So let's take a listen to Katy O'Brien.
When you get a script, what's the first thing that you, as an actor, notice scripturally when you want to read that? What is the first thing that draws you to that script?
The first thing that I really noticed just by looking at the page is how much dialogue to not even just action description there is. If there's just, especially for TV, if there's a bunch of description of what's going on in the surroundings, whatever, little thing, I'm already out. Like, I'm not to say I'm turning the project down, but I'm zoning out too much because when we're thinking TV specifically, it's got to be go. And oftentimes, especially with like network TV and procedurals and things like that, it's very much character driven and situation driven things. So when I see a lot, like a whole page of just like almost camera descriptions, I'm just like, what's going on here? Okay. But the next big thing that I notice, because mostly what I have to do is make sure that I'm paying attention to the dialogue. When I read the dialogue, you can 100% tell if someone wrote it with a British accent in their head. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves when someone sends me a part wanting to read it in an American accent when they very clearly in their head were like, and then she walked towards the palace, you know, whatever, in a British accent. Because there's no way that you can pull it off. It's like, it's impossible. I've tried multiple times, and then I actually, like, when I'm doing self-tapes and reading for these things, I'll do it in a British accent, and it just fits. It's just like, this is what they were trying to do. So you can tell the voice that somebody wrote something in, you can tell 100%. And you can also tell when they don't read the dialogue out loud or read it with someone, because it's like, it just sounds like, wow, no one would actually say that. Like, that's not how a human being talks. That's, you know, that's more like, oh, this is in a book or something. So you can kind of almost tell if someone's like, if they're trying to convert from novel writing to screenwriting. And there's a very fine balance, as I've learned myself.
Oh, hi. Hey, this is future Brad, or past Brad. I can't really keep that straight. Just interrupting you for just a minute to tell you about our sponsor, Fiberglass Freak's Batman Museum. That's right, an actual museum dedicated to the 1966 Batman TV show. What could be better? It's right here in Logansport, Indiana, and it is an amazing place. Mark Rakup, who owns the place, is actually DC and Warner Brothers' only official builder of 1966 Batmobile replicas. Now, I'm not talking some little toy. I'm talking about a full-size working car. And you can go to the museum and see some of those right now. Plus all the toys from when you were a kid, everything dealing with Batman, especially the 1966 show. Go on in there, and if you go in there and tell them that the Working Writer Podcast sent you, you get $2 off your admission right now. So go in. You have no excuse not to go. So let's go back to the show. I'm sure it's more interesting than I am. So watch the podcast and then get to writing. Much like Dave Barry, Ridley Pearson was also on my get list. I really wanted to talk to him because he's a great teacher. He loves to talk about his books. It's just a fantastic time when talking to Ridley Pearson, and I've done it twice. We're only going to feature one little thing from Ridley today. The thing that made me jealous about Ridley Pearson is he was already a best-selling author. He had a lot of mysteries. He had a lot of whodunits out there. But then he went to Disney, of all things, with Dave Barry, of course, and you'll hear it in the story, and decided to write young people's mysteries set at Disney World. And what happened? It came out called The Kingdom Keepers. Great series of books. We've got them all. You need to pick them up. But these books are fantastic. But in this clip, he actually talks about the origin of Kingdom Keepers and what it means for him to be able to go to Disney all the time.
For you, sir, is one I've been wanting to ask ever since I found out we could do this. Do you get to jump at the front of every line at Disney now?
I do.
Okay,
but that's
the interview is now over. I don't want to.
It's a rare privilege. What happened was while Dave Barry and I were working on Peter, well, actually before Dave Barry and I started working on a series of books called Peter and the Starcatcher and Starcatchers, I had gone to Disney World with Dave Barry because he told me I couldn't go without him. He said, I am the world's expert on Walt Disney World. And so you always want to one-up Dave Barry because he's the smartest guy in the room. And it's rare you get a chance. And so I had a chance. And at that time, my adult thrillers were being published by an obscure division of Disney called Hyperion Books. And I called my publisher and said, hey, do you have any contacts so that I could sort of one-up Dave Barry when we get to Disney World? And he said, oh, let me make some calls. Well, they gave us the most amazing 3 days, including, as you mentioned, the front of the line. And after that, those 3 days, which were incredible, I was raised to write thank you notes. So I had written some thank you notes. And then I thought, for what they gave us, this is not good enough. I've got to call them. So I called the publisher. He referred me to somebody at Disney, an editor there named Wendy Lefcon. And Wendy and I got talking about, I was probably 45, 46, and it was my first trip to Disney ever. And she said, how do you like it? And I said, I loved it, of course, and I want to thank you for this. But one of the things I noticed was that all the attractions are framed around a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is my bailiwick. And when I go to other unnamed theme parks, they just want to make me throw up.
Right.
Which they often do. And so what interested me and involved me was that, and one reason I think we can all go on those rides multiple times in our lives is we see something new every time, because there's actually a massive subliminal story, sometimes subliminal, being told to you. And that just fascinated me. And she and I got talking about me possibly writing something for Disney. And they wanted a non-adult thriller set inside their theme parks. And there were all these caveats, which were horror moments for a thriller writer, because nothing bad could happen. No kids could get hurt. No sabotage on the rides. It was like anything that might be involved in a thriller could not happen. And I eventually ginned up some ideas that they liked. And she said, so can you get going on this? And I said, I really can't, because my writing process is that I observe, and then I write, and then I edit. And observation might be working on Google, or it might be spending weeks in a library. And it almost always involves going to the location that I'm writing about and spending time there, so I get a sense for it. And I said, so I would need to get inside your theme parks after dark, when everybody's gone. And she said, that is never going to happen. And I said, well, I understand that, but then I can't write for you. Well, she called back a month later and said, I've pulled strings. And just as you asked, I am sending you basically a lifetime pass inside the Disney parks for free. And if you let us know when you're going, we will arrange an Imagineer, the people who create and then build the rides, to be your private guide after hours in the park. Now can you write the books? And I said, yes. So yeah, I carry this, I carry a VIP card that lets me into the parks for free. And, on 30 occasions, I've been able to call ahead of time and go in at like 4:30 in the morning and walk these rides. I walk the emergency route, which takes about an hour and a half. And then I ask them, and they're always very polite about this, and they let me ride the thing alone 5, 6, 10 times. Dave and I, for some books we wrote, we we rode the Peter Pan ride 12 times in a row. We were trying to time it. We couldn't get our stopwatches working right, but we eventually got it right. So yeah, I have this amazing privilege right now. I mean, they could cancel this tomorrow, but right now I still have this wonderful privilege of being able to get in the parks when no one's in there.
So here's the shortcut. Start writing suspense and thrillers under a small Disney title. Have Disney allow you to write books for them about the theme park. Get the lifetime pass. Get in there. Accidentally, your stopwatch is not working, and you have to keep going on the ride over and over.
One of the things, what you mentioned,
chaperone, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of the great gifts they gave us that weekend, Dave and me and our families, was they gave us what they call a vest, a VIP guide. And perhaps you've had this, and it is extraordinary because they just take you right to the front of every line, or sometimes in the back, and then you get into the line. But to this day, this is how our kids think. You go to Disney World and Disneyland. I go, no. Usually you get 3 rides in like 8 hours,
A short-run TV show ended up being a short run, only 14 episodes, called Enlisted. Now, I ended up loving the show, but when it first came out, the pilot episode was not what we shall say fun. It definitely was not what military folks expected from a show today. Mike Royce, the creator, executive producer, and writer of the show, came on to talk to me about exactly what that feedback from veterans meant for the furthering of the show. And let this be a lesson to all writers. Sometimes you just have to listen to your audience. So let's let Mike talk to us about what that actually meant for that show. Sir, first question I want to start with you today is a very, very important one. What's more difficult, writing a half-hour comedy or walking a picket line?
I'm going to say writing a half-hour comedy is way more difficult. Walking a picket line wears you out physically. But when you go to sleep, you sleep the sleep of the just. There's no stress because you don't have any choice you're not writing. There's no pressure to write. There's no, how are we ever going to figure out this story problem? How will this script ever get done? We just finished the first draft and it sucks. And the taping's tomorrow and that run through went terribly. And all the kinds of things that happen when you're writing and in, my case, in production, doing shows, none of that is on a picket line. Picket lines physically, but at least you're talking to people who are in the same boat as you and you're all sort of pointed in one direction. Then you go home and you're exhausted and you go to sleep.
I also wanted to touch on, while we're talking, because I've got you here and you're kind of a captive audience at this moment. You know that one of the reasons I very first heard of you was because of that, which is probably, my favorite thing that you have done, which is Enlisted.
Okay, I have that one is over there. I have a different one. I had a pilot one, but that's yes.
Oh, well, see, now you're just showing off.
I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah.
But I think the Enlisted fascinates me because of the whole story of what happened going from pilot to the next, we'll say, what was another 13 episodes after that.
Yeah.
Now, what, from a showrunner and creator's point of view, what happened for you after you finished the pilot and showed it the first time?
Everybody hated us.
I will have to say I was in that ilk as well. So
it was a great lesson in knowing your shit, and we did not. We had a consultant. We weren't dumb enough to just make a show about the military without consultants, but the consultant was great, but we kind of ran a little roughshod over him because he would, he wanted to just, he knew it's a show. Right. So sometimes producers are just going to say, we don't care that that's what really happens. We want to do it this way because that's a better show. Mm-hmm. So there was stuff like in the pilot, one specific moment I remember is we're outside for the first time and they have their covers on. And I, having been a veteran of pilots, I remember always people are like, we got to see their faces. We got to see their faces. We got to see their faces. Making sure, because a lot of times stuff gets obscured, and it's like it's the first show, so you really want to like establish who everybody is, and like faces are really important. And so there's shadows on their faces when they got the covers on. And I'm like, well, they got to take the covers off. I'm sure I called them hats, by the way.
I was about to congratulate you for saying covers.
I remember very little jargon from then, and covers is one of the things. That's another thing another lesson is like, I got my head filled with military information, and most of it's gone right now.
The Simpsons at this point had been on for, I think, something around 36 years. The longest running television show, period. And I got lucky enough to have Michael Price, one of the writers and producers, on the podcast. I swear to Michael, tell him you work on The Simpsons, please.
I work on The Simpsons, Brad.
It's because it was during the writer's strike, so they really had nothing better to do. But he was a fantastic guest. And when I asked him the question as to whether we should actually still be writing Spec scripts, he was of a particular opinion. So why don't we listen to Michael Price tell me why we should or shouldn't be writing Spec scripts.
Is it still, don't bother actually writing your pilot episode because you've got to go sell it before you even bother to write it? Or should you go ahead and write out that first episode and then get everything from there?
That's a great question. From my understanding of how things work now, and I'm seeing it from a little bit of a remove, only in front of the fact that I've been so lucky to be working on Simpsons for all this time that I don't need necessarily to have like spec material to go out there to get a job. But my understanding from a sort of a sideways point of view of it, which is that I've been reading people's material for even to hire them for Episode Family or other projects. And there's a huge premium now placed by agents and I think by the industry on having like original, like your sample should be an original thing. So a play that you wrote, or the most basic version of that would be like an original pilot.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily agree with that from the point of view of like someone who's looking to staff a show. I'm looking to hire someone because practically, this for your listeners too. You'll see that like when I was hiring, we had like maybe 2 or 3 open spots for a staff on Episode for Family, and we got like 200 submissions. So there's lots of people out there. And so I'd have to spend a weekend reading tons and tons of scripts. And I'm not looking, it's interesting because when you're looking to hire someone to be mostly, for the most part, possibly like a entry level old staff writer or story editor, like, or at any level, you're looking for someone who can be a writer for Episode Family. You're not looking for someone who has the great American pilot. Like I'm not programming Netflix. I'm looking to hire someone to be on my staff. So I would much rather read like if all I had was 130 Rocks or something, whatever, or Family Guys or whatever, then I could say this person's funny, this person's funny, this person's funny. So to me, it makes more sense from that. But I would say this, but I know that the preference right now is for people to have original things. And so that's, so I think it's, but when you're writing that original pilot, the most part, the chance that that's going to be the thing that gets made or becomes the next whatever, I'd say is very small, only because you're just at the beginning of your career. So you need to be thinking about that. Like, how does that showcase me? How is this my calling card for who I am as a person, who I am as a writer? What is my point of view? Am I funny? Can I come up with interesting characters, a good story? And don't worry so much about, will this be the one that Netflix wants to make? Then when you get to that position, when you get to a position where, let's say you've worked for a couple of years on a show, and then you want to take something out, and even if you have that original pilot, for the most part, I believe you'll still be pitching it. You still have to pitch it, and you possibly could leave it behind. There's some question of whether or not like leaving behind is a good thing or not, because sometimes the pitch gets them excited about it, and then if you leave it behind, then they can pick through it and say, now that I read page 8, I don't like it so much. And if you have a really dazzling pitch, then that might be enough. So, but anyway, then you might want to have a pilot to leave behind, or you might not. But for the most part, the things you're writing now, especially if you're just getting started or you're interested in getting started, are going to be samples that will make you stand out from everyone else in that pile of 200 scripts.
How many scripts do you get into during that course of a weekend before your eyes start crossing?
Yeah, not many. I mean, I'll read as many as I can. But that's also another axiom that I'll say, which is that they'll tell you this, and it's largely true, that you want to make a really strong impression right away. Which is that because let's say I have 50 scripts to read on a Saturday or something like that. So maybe the first couple I'll read most of the way through, but then as you're saying, you start to get tired or whatever. You start to make a little more of a snap judgment maybe on the first 10 or 11 pages, and you go, I think whatever. So I can't stress enough the importance of getting off to a good start. And it's supposed to be a comedy, being funny, really funny on page one. The one thing I'll say that I see so much, and it is part of that conundrum of them wanting original stuff, is that the feeling of you've got your original pilot is establishing a whole new world, So let's say it's set, for instance, one of my favorite shows right now is The Bear on Hulu, which is an amazing show. But that creates an entire world of working at this restaurant, and I'm trying to remember what the pilot of that was. It started with that crazy dream he had about the bear chasing him down the bridge. But anyway, the let's say you're doing a show set in a restaurant or whatever, the temptation is going to be to want to spell out this is what the restaurant looks like. This is who the main character is, and so sometimes I'll read so many of those, and the first page will be almost 80% stage directions of the guy or the girl, the main character, waking up in the morning and putting on their clothes and because you want to see who they are. But meanwhile, it's okay, what is it? So whereas let's say if you're writing a Spec Seinfeld or whatever, I know all my references start extremely old. I'm owning that right now.
Okay, don't start saying Seinfeld is extremely old. I'm having ageism problems right now.
Well, let's say for a current show, What We Do in the Shadows. That's my favorite current comedy. If you're writing a Spec What We Do in the Shadows, we all know who the characters are already. So you can have an amazing joke from Nandor on 3 lines into page 1. You don't have to spend a whole page writing, this is a house in Staten Island, So anyway, just know that someone's reading that and they really want to love it. They want to love it. They want to say oh my God, I found it. This is the script, So don't waste so much time with setup and everything, and just make it as big and funny and whatever, or if it's a drama or if it's a dramedy, something really gripping, something really exciting, right from the get-go.
So you're saying my MASH spec probably isn't going to get me a job?
I hope you've enjoyed going down memory lane with us as much as I have. Remember, you can listen to all of these podcast episodes on our podcast page, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts out. They're all still out there, and they're fantastic interviews to listen to. Sorry they're not all on video, but as I said before, it was a simpler time. And remember, we do this for you because I want to make sure that beginning writers get the motivation they need. After all, we work to pay our bills, as we always say, but we write for our mental health because we want to, because it's what we have to do. So, leave us a comment. Tell us how you like it. Tell us what you want to see in the future. Until next time, though, pay your bills, but make sure that you keep on writing, okay? For yourselves and for us. So until next time, get to writing.